Welcome to my YouTube channel, Rick Surowicz Watercolor. At any time during this video, you can click on the link in the bottom right hand corner to subscribe to my channel. If you want to see more of my YouTube videos or learn more about my online classes, workshops, and courses, you can click on the link at the end of the video. This is the narrated tutorial for my painting Inland Waters. Hey everybody, this is Rick Surowicz. I'm here in my studio, and today I'm going to be doing a painting for my YouTube channel. And this is going to be an elongated format of a coastal inlet scene here. And I'm going to be working on a sheet of 140-pound cold press Watercolor watercolor paper, and it's 7.5 inches by 20 inches. So it's basically a half sheet of watercolor paper divided once again in half. And I take 2 inches off the end to give me the dimensions that I want. So it's 7.5 inches by 20 inches. And I've adjusted my screen setup to accommodate this format. And for my demonstration, I'll be showing my palette, the artwork, and the image that I'm using for inspiration. I've made a few adjustments to the composition to focus on some of the areas I want. I've stretched the water a little bit here and there so I could pick up some reflections. And I've adjusted the profile of this land in the foreground, and I've positioned some trees in a manner that will allow me to create the composition and focus on the elements that I feel are important in my interpretation of this scene. So with that being said, we're going to go ahead and get going. All right, we're ready to get painting here. And I'm going to start with the sky, and I'm going to keep a fairly simple sky. I'm not going to get involved with a bunch of clouds. It's not really going to, this isn't a painting about clouds. I'm going to keep that simple. And I'm going to work with some warmer colors here to cooler. I'm going to be using raw sienna and cerulean blue. And just a quick note about cerulean blue. There's a couple formulations out there. Some are much greener than others, have a greenish tint. And when you mix them, as I'm going to with raw sienna, they even get a greener tint to them. So just a note, the cerulean I'm using is a PB36 pigment from American Journey, and I don't have too much trouble with it getting green on me, but some people do. There's another formulation out there, PB35, and it seems to have more a greenish cast to it. So I'm going to start with the cerulean blue and the raw sienna. And I'm going to just mix a little of each into one another. And I'm just getting a big pool of color. Now I'm working at about a 20-degree angle. And I could do this wet or apply water first, but I'm just going to start with a warm color here and work towards cooler, more towards the blue. And the one thing that I'm going to do here before I go any further is I'm going to paint this sky, and then I'm going to come in and I'm going to paint this distant tree line here, or mountains, and I want to maintain a clean edge for the water. And when I want to do that, I'll often just use this rice tape. This is Nichiban 251, or I have other drafting tape I'll use. It does a pretty good job sealing, and the rice tape doesn't disturb the pigment below generally. It works pretty well, although I haven't painted yet. But I'm going to use that to keep a clean line there. I'm probably going to do the same thing there. So I almost forgot to do that. But I'm going to bring this this color, this moisture, now a little warmer tone to it, down to the base of this tree line. And I'm going to come back in when that's damp. And just going to thin that down with water. And then I'm going to paint in that distant land mass or trees, whatever that is. So I'm going to start with my cerulean blue mixture over here. water, and I'm going to just bring those two together. I'm just going to let that work down into these trees. What I'll be painting over here is going to be darker. I'm going to soften that up a little bit. I'm going to bring this down to here. And I could also paint this wet and wet, but I'm not going to. I'm going to just stick with this first landmass. Then I'm going to have a little bit more of a harder edge on this. Not too hard. I'll soften it up. But this is a very subtle transition from warm to cool. It may be hard to pick up on the camera, but it's a little bluer here, a little more warm, kind of raw sienna here, and it's a light value. It's going to dry even lighter, but I wanted to keep it nice and light. And now I'm just going to take a round brush. I'm going to get rid of this big pool of water that I have here on my palette. That's most of what that is. And I'm just going to mix a little cobalt blue, some rose madder to give a violet. Get a little more blue in that. So that gives me a violet. And now I want to gray that down. So I'm going to take some hands of yellow and start to gray that down, maybe a little too much. So I'm going to come back with a little more of my red and blue mixture and just mix that around till I get the something that I like. So that's getting close. All right. And I look at my paper, it's about right for me to come in now and add this distant landmass. I'm actually going to add a little more yellow to a mixture. Get almost a greenish cast in some spots. I'm going to carry that beyond where you see it, where these trees are going to be, so I can paint those in. Just touch that with some more color. So this is a neutral, but there's some subtle color shifts in here. This is has a little rose tint to it. This has a little yellow greenish cast. This is a little more violet, gray violet. I get a little more of a blue in here. I'm going to carry that across. I'm just going to drop some slightly darker values, not too much, and add to that to give a little variation so it looks like there's some, some different shapes within that in the distance, but very subtle. Still might get a little more. So I'm going to throw a little more. The paper's still pretty wet, so I'm going to get very soft edges and the colors are going to diffuse. I could get a little thicker with my paint and it will start to hold a little more, but I don't want a lot of edge or anything. I want this all to be very soft and feel in the distance. Let's see. This should hold a little more because my paint's a little thicker. probably a touch darker than what I wanted. So I'm going to use my brush, just a damp brush. Take that down a little. That's pretty good. I think I'll just stop fussing with it. And now, I brought that down to the edge there, so I'll have a nice clean edge on the water line there. And I might actually take just a little more, just to actually strengthen the contrast on the edge. A little more of that. All right, now I'm going to dry this. All right, this is thoroughly dry now, and I'm going to start to paint these trees in here. And these are still in the distance, and there's going to be some changes in the values, slight changes in the value and color, but it's going to be fairly subtle. And I'm going to have harder edges in here, but I am going to soften them up a little bit as I paint those. So I'm going to go ahead and get going. I was going to use some tape, but I think I'm just going to paint it in and leave it just a little bit more irregular as I paint that. So I'm going to start with some sap green, which is a kind of a convenience color that I like to use. And I'm going to add a little quinacridone gold. But these are going to be more neutral. So I'm going to take some pyro red. Maybe I'll take some rose madder, a little cooler. I'm going to use some ultramarine blue. A little bit more. And I'm going to use this, just a general purpose round brush. Let's see, I use a little burnt sienna. I just want to have this tint, a little bit of green and gold, but fairly neutral. So I'm just mixing around until I get kind of what I'm after. All right, now I'm going to go ahead and start. And let's see, so we have a variety of trees. I'm actually going to use my quill brush for this. I like doing these kinds of subject matter with this. It's not where I want to start. We're going to start out here. There's a band of yellow, kind of a gold right here, linear, horizontal, that I want to maintain. So I want to be careful where I'm going so I don't lose that. Looking for a bit of a gray, kind of a gray bluish green here and there. So I started to get that. Add a little more water. I don't want it to be quite as dark as it was getting. There's actually some variation in the value there. I'm going to work some of this more green gold in. Go back to this bluish gray. You know, a lot of times people, when they're working in dark areas, can get locked into just painting just flat colors, one color, mix it on their palette, and just put it in a flat wash. And I see it more with dark washes than probably the lighter. And you know, you can make a dark value very interesting with color changes, and just keep the value consistent. And you know, you can make your darks very interesting, especially with shadows. People are hesitant to just to get a little variation in color in that. Just, you know, just because it's a dark doesn't mean you just painted a flat color. So I'm gonna kind of let that go right there. And just soften that a little bit, but I'll be painting darker values over top of that. So I think I'm gonna let that go. And where's my bottom? So we have the land that comes out here, we have the water, and I'm gonna leave that water fairly light, and it's gonna pick up my reflections. Right now I'm gonna go out here. I could actually, we'll see what happens here. I'm gonna soften, and this is kind of risky, but I'm gonna soften those edges a little bit, and still keep it feeling like it's farther away. So just a little softness there, and now I'm gonna come in and dry that before I start getting any blocks. All right, so I softened that up. I got a little blossom there, but it doesn't bother me. It's kind of interesting with the subject. And now I want to take some of this quinacridone gold, and there's just kind of a bright band of color. I'm going to add a little permanent green light. Add a little bit of green to it. There's this nice band of bright color. And you want to make sure to capture the intensity of the color. It's going to be its brightest when you're painting on the white of the paper. So I need to get that before I come in and start glazing with anything else, or I won't be able to. It won't be as bright. It won't reach its full potential in terms of the color intensity. And now I want a little bit of a violet. Let's see if I still have some room here. And I'm gonna come in, it's probably a little too dark. And I want to paint this kind of a violet, these rocks in. I want to let it merge with the edge of that gold tone, greenish gold that I just put down. So now I have that shoreline described. Probably need to come back all the way in case any of that peeks through. There's my shoreline. think I'm going to come in. There's a patch of trees over here that I'm going to go ahead and do. Now this is getting closer to us. This is almost, but not quite, almost middle ground. Probably is middle ground, just a little bit beyond it. This is starting to be a little more distant here. This is definitely distant, but here we're moving forward in space. You know, and certain things happen as you move forward in space, depending on your composition and the lighting, but in the situation that I'm painting, some of this, the values are going to change, could get darker, the edges get a little harder. So I'm just showing the tops of some of these. And, you know, don't try and paint everything with the tip of your brush. Sometimes you just want to drag the edge. I think I'm probably about 50-50 when I paint, when I'm using the tip of my brush and when I'm using the edge or corner or something other than just painting directly with the tip of a brush. Your shapes, your edges on landscapes and things, on trees will be more natural, I guess, more organic. I think when you use your brush effectively, and don't just try and paint everything with the tip of your brush. So we have a collection of trees here. Now I'm letting this all kind of merge together. And I really need to be a little darker. Get some ultramarine. And I'm just using all this collection of colors that I have. There's some interesting colors on my palette at the moment. Working wet in wet, letting some of this just kind of come together. And I have some firs or something stuck out here. Fir trees. Or they could be, yeah, they could be pine, white pine. So I'm not going to fuss with that too much at this point. And I have this piece of land that's going to go all the way across here. And I have some trees that are going to come down. And I'm going to let those, I'm probably going to paint all that at once. And let's see, I'm going to have some overlap. I'm trying to decide, do I want to put any of these reflections in? I might put subtle suggestion of some of these reflections because as I paint this, I'm going to get some overlap. And I can't paint this tree, or any of these trees, and have then come in afterwards and try and put the reflections in. So I'm going to give this a dry, what I have here, and then I'm going to just put in some subtle reflections right there. All right, now we're going to work on these reflections there. So I'm going to use clear water. I'm going to leave this pretty much the white of the paper. And this area that is the water, make sure you get that wet. I'm going to drop a little bit of color in. So I'm going to get a little This is cobalt blue, a little rose madder, and just a touch, probably too much, of the Hansa yellow. Alright, I think there will give me the color I'm after. And just give it a slight indication of some reflections. Maybe get a little more of the violet, a little stronger. I don't want to lose everything here in terms of the white of the paper, but it's a very small area that I'm working with. So there's just a subtle suggestion of that reflection. And now I'm coming over here. Actually, I'm going to put some more water on this. Paint in there. Get this wet again. Now I'm going to get some kind of bluish greens, gray green. Alright, so now it's a very narrow area, obviously, this band of water, so I'm going to not overdo it because I still want to be able to see some of the white, some of the light reflecting. So I have just a little bit of reflection there. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to start to paint this massive trees here and the land that stretches across. So before I do that, I'm going to need to dry this because I don't want to get any of this area here. I just painted those reflections in to carry over. All right, we're ready to start working in this area of trees and in this stretch of land that comes all the way across. And here I have the edge of the water. So I'm going to set my palette up to deal with this collection of shapes and areas that I'm going to be painting. So I put down a little sap green. I'll use some quinacridone gold. I'm going to use some pyro red, maybe some rose madder. I'm going to use some royal blue. Royal blue I use often when I want to get some darker values. Might take some quinacridone burnt orange here. So the one thing I'm doing, and the reason I do this, is I'm working with the opposite sides of the color wheels, and this is going to let me mix a collection of neutrals and more natural colors, and have a variety of color in my painting. So I'm going to get darker here. I've got quite a bit of water there. I need to be aware of that. We'll add a little. So there's some quinacridone gold into the royal blue, with some rose madder in it. It makes a pretty dark mixture. And I'm going to go ahead and start painting. So, I have this little, I'm going to find my way. So we have this water here, and then we have this piece of land that comes across. And it might be a little dark to start. So I have this little tree out here on the point, kind of on the edge. Just give a suggestion of that tree. Let's put a few touches of gold. Not going to be too obvious, but there's a little temperature shift. We got another tree. Let's see, we got a couple here. Here, when I make these marks, I'm dragging, as I had said, my brush. So this come together. And that needs to come all the way down. Kind of a dark value here at the base of these trees, and then we get into some golds and other colors. Start to get a little higher. I want to go over that tree line some. Bring in some lighter, warmer colors. And work in some of the brighter, or some of the darker colors also into that. So there's not much of it. There's not a real strong light in this, but I'm going to be keeping the lighter side here as from this warmer sky coming in. It's not direct sunlight, but there is some warmth to it. Take some of the moisture out of my brush as I make these marks. And you can do this with a flat brush. I like this quill brush, and I use it quite a bit. And I'm trying to work this wash, albeit slowly, coming across as one continuous wash. So I try to avoid letting hard edges start to set here. So I don't have a strong bead of water or anything, but it's still on the damp side. So it allows me to continue it. A little bit of water. The other thing is my paint's been pretty thick to this point. If I get a little too much water, I'll start to create some backwashes. And I'm going to switch to a larger brush and kind of move this along a little bit, start to have a little less detail as I get over here. Go back and do a little bit more with the tops of this. Create kind of a broken edge. All right, so now this comes down quickly to a kind of a gold tone. I think I can still work that in. And I'm going to use this quinacridone gold and a larger brush. And we're just going to throw some color in here. Actually, I want that to be a little brighter. Let me clean a spot here on my palette. I'll still be using some of these colors, so I'm not going to completely clear it. Take some hands of yellow and put in a, I'm going to try and get more of a yellow green here in some spots. I'll use some permanent green light. That will give me a little bit of that green. Get a little paler as I go in here. I actually want to get a little more red going in the mixture. I'm going to take some ultramarine blue and a little rose madder. I'm going to get us more of a gray. I just want to let that kind of merge with what I've got going on there. And I'm going to carry this green across. Back to my gold. Maybe a little yellow in there. I'll take this through here. little reddish tone. This green, and I'm going to come in with that kind of a violet. You can see the variety of colors I have on my palette, and you know, I think too often we worry so much about the name of a paint being used. Just, you know, you don't have to have one special color or anything. Just make sure you understand the color wheel and how complements work, and I think you'd be much better off than trying to buy every tube of paint every artist you watch uses. And now I have this other area here that I'm gonna take this gold, and it's not that we don't all have favorite colors, but just don't get so bogged down. I know I get emails sometimes from people who are so worried because they can't just get one particular color that I happen to use in a painting, and you know, there's normally many other options. All right, so this dark is really starting to creep up. It's starting to wick because the paint's drier up there, and it's starting to pull that up like a paper towel would. So I'm going to dry this before I get too much more of that wicking. I want to keep some of the freshness there. I actually am going to lift out a little with a damp brush. All right, now I'm going to go ahead and dry this. All right, I'm going to clear a spot here to get some fresh color. But I'll still be using some of what I have here. So I want a little fresher mixture of my gold, my yellows, my green. This is permanent green light. Alright, now we have this area here. Probably a little too strong, but not bad. So I've got this, I've stretched out this area of water a little bit so we can see more eventually what's going on with reflections and whatnot. Now I'm going to bring in some of these greens. I'm trying not to get too ticky-tacky as I paint this. Not a very technical word, but keeping it nice, simple shapes. Now this subject certainly has an opportunity to do some scraping if I wanted. And at the moment, it's a little wet to do that. The paper's saturated. I can see the water on top. It's very glossy. And if I were to go in now, I'm not going to get the scraping that I want. So I'm going to let that dry. But I'm going to come in with a little of this darker color here to let this merge into this wash and just give this dark tone on the shoreline. Need to get some of that over here. I have this tree that's going to be right here. And I'm not going to paint it in yet because these surfaces are too wet. I'll lose the shape, but I'm going to do a little bit with the base. I'm going to scrape this this dark value up a little bit. And that will give me some texture. There's some pattern. So I'm not trying to actually scrape so much lights into it. I'm just trying to scrape the darker color up. But I'm almost to the point where I can get some. Let's see, here we're pretty good shape. So helps create a few layers here, create some overlap, will help build depth. And in here, like it's too dry. See how dry that is? But here I still have a sheen to it, so I can scrape some light shapes into this, and this is closer to us. Try and drag some of those up a little higher. I'd like to get some overlap into there. Probably would have been good if I had scraped into this a little before it had dried. I'm going to do the opposite. I'm going to try and put a little something here and scrape down. So that breaks that edge up a little. Alright, let's see. So I think I'm going to come in just a little bit with a little bit more the darker value, using some ultramarine and some rose madder, and grabbing some greens and things here on my palette so I get a more of a neutral. You have to be careful I don't get too much water in this. It'll really start to blossom on me. But I want some darker values along this shoreline. I'll bring a little of that up. So I don't want to get too busy in here because this is gonna. I don't want this to be the focal point of it. It's kind of in here. This tree in the end is going to be more of a focal point. So I've got those areas painted, and I've got this little piece of land here that I was going to bring out. I changed what was going on here just to kind of suit my needs. I wanted more water here to use for reflection, and now I've got this this area here, which is going to be more neutral. It's more kind of being backlit from what's going on out in front of it. Just mixing everything I've got on my palette to come up with more of a neutral. And it's pretty much a middle value that I put down here. And I think I might get a little more of a red tone here or there. And let's see, pick up a little more. See if I can put a little in here, some of this red. A little touch here. So just kind of sneak in this red, which will kind of lead us into here. And then I probably could have had a little more here. Alright. I think I'm at a point now where I'm going to dry. I'll come back, I'm going to put this tree in here. And then I'm going to put in some reflections. All right, now I'm going to mix a just kind of a fairly dark, somewhat neutral mixture here to paint this tree. And I want to have a little bit of a reddish. It's almost going to be a kind of a grayed down reddish violet, I think, maybe a little more blue in it. So now I'm going to paint in this tree, and this is kind of a, this is one of those things where you just have to do it. You've done all this painting, and now you have this fairly strong element you're putting in. And you kind of go with it. It's an area here where you could, you might create something here that you're not real fond of, but because it's so noticeable. But you just kind of go with it and grab your brush and paint it in. And I'm going to get a little darker here or there. I have a few things maybe coming up around it. And help make that feel grounded here. Things here. I actually have a couple little small trees off to the side that are in the same general spot in space as that tree. Doesn't quite have the level of contrast as this one does here, because it's on a middle value that I'm putting these in. I'm pretty much just dragging my brush around. create those. So they're much more subtle than this because they're on a already a neutral background. Okay, now I'm going to put in some reflections in all that I have. So I'm going to take some clear water. It's not so clear. Get some water. I'm getting this fairly wet. And I'm going to bring this all the way over here, this moisture. So it's pretty wet. And now what I'm going to do is try and pick up some of those colors. I'm going to let that, actually I want to pick up a little bit. Let's see, I want to bring this moisture all the way over so that whole area is wet. And I'm going to lift a little bit of that moisture because it's a little too wet at the moment. And we're pretty good here. So now I'm going to pick up some of the reflections. It's a very narrow band of water, so I don't want to overdo it because I want to keep some of the light in the water. So I'm not going to overdo it with the reflections. Remember, there's warm and there's cool. So I'll pick up some of that. Get a touch of that red. Okay, so this is still wet here. More blue. think I'm gonna make a little stronger statement here. And perhaps carry it just a little bit. A little bit suggestion of the edge of the shore. Alright, now I'm going to give this a quick dry. I think I might make a few marks here. So I'm going to dry this. Alright, now this is dry, and these trees that I painted right here really need to be darker. I need to have some of my darker values in this area and lead the eye around here, but I don't want to see the edge of this coming through the trees. I can see that, and I went ahead and painted that underneath that because I know I was going to be painting darker values over top, but I really haven't captured the darker values. So I'm going to come in here with a much darker value and make sure that I'm not seeing through the wash that I put down. And I really need some darker values just in this area and a few others too. But I need to strengthen what's going on here. It needs to be darker. This area is closer to us than these, and I want to have my strongest values in this area. So I'm going to paint a few things in here and bring in these really dark values. And I'm going to get a little darker here. And I like to connect with the edge. Too often, you see paintings where somebody's afraid to go to the edge and their painting starts to float. You don't want to have your painting floating. That's part of your composition, so you need to consider what you're doing with the edge. So now here's a few kind of rocky shapes I'm going to put in out here. Now this darker value now, it reads that it's all in the same space. And I'm going to pick some of that up over here because they're very close in space. And I can go a little darker here. So my darkest values are along this part of kind of the foreground here. Then we start to move back to the middle ground where it's more middle value, and then we get lighter towards the background. So that helps us spatially understand where things are in relation to one another as far as the depth. And then this helps build depth. And if I have the same value here and back here, the composition flattens out and you start to lose your depth. So, you know, just a few touches of value. It's not that you may not use them somewhere, but it's like I wanna strengthen this tree, so I'm gonna put a little bit of a value, a darker value in there, but not much. And I need to modify the shape a little. So a few touches of that value maybe somewhere else, but not quite as dark. And let's see, I think I'm going to I'll do a little lifting out in some areas. This is kind of a bit of a scraggly tree, if that's a word. And I could go darker with this. This is even closer to us. And I might not though. Let's see. Let's go a little darker on that. But still keep it very, very nondescript. Not a lot of detail in this, just very simple washes. But this might help lead the eye into this. So I think we're pretty good there. And now once again I want to dry this, and I'm going to do some lifting. Alright, this is thoroughly dried, and I think I've decided I want to show a little stronger reflection here. So I'm going to risk doing a bit more on top of what I have. We'll put in this glaze, this clear water over it right now. And I think I want to pick up just a little stronger presence of that reflection. And I'm going to carry it stronger here in this area. And I'm going to do the same here. So just a little stronger, and that should be enough. And maybe a little more here. All right, and that should be pretty good. So let's dry this, and then I'll do the lifting that I was going to do. All right, so now I'm ready to lift a little bit, and I'm just using a nylon angled brush, and I'm taking some of the moisture off, so it's damp. It's not saturated. It doesn't have a bead of water, and I'm just going to take this and just take a few of these out. I'm not going to go crazy with this. I don't want them all to look the same. Something cutting across there. Shape just kind of cuts across the green like a kind of a dried out pine or something. As I do this, as I put these lines in, I want to make sure I don't line them directly above the trees below, because that will create a kind of undesirable tangent. And now I'm going to pick up a little of that, the area I lifted out. I want to pick up some of that in the reflection. A little bit here. That's probably enough. Now I'm going to take my liner brush. This is just a number 1 liner brush. I'm going to put a few just tree trunks. I like to add these. I think they add interest to some dried out trees coming through. I also want, I don't like the mark I made here when I lift it off. I want to break it up a little, so I'm going to do a little of that. I'll throw one of these trees in here, just dried out. More subtle. And I just have a few kind of thin branches or weeds or kind of saplings and things just growing here. All right, so let me dry this. So as we look at this is this elongated format, and you know it creates kind of a unique situation for a focal point. I've tried just to move the eye through here and make this more of the focal point, but try and bounce around from here. Just a few touches of the values and these colors, the brightness of the colors. But here's the darkest values I have, the strongest contrast, just to kind of lead you through and into this scene and let you weave through there. But the placement of this value lets you know that, you know, all these shapes here are on in this kind of a foreground area. Then we get more middle value back here, middle value dominance in the middle ground, and then lighter value dominance in the background. Even though we have some of these lighter shapes coming through, my darkest shapes are right in this area. So go ahead and we'll take a quick look at that with a mat on it. And there we have the painting of this inlet. So I hope you enjoyed this. Thank you for watching.